Hello and welcome back, Paxians. I'm Eltarii, the professional gamer, and this is the fifth and final section of our Pax Dei Wilderness Alpha interview series with the developers. And this week is Community Week, meaning we have been armed with all of the questions you, the community, have come up with over, I think, the last week. And there are a lot of questions to go over and a lot of really good, juicy details as well. So I hope that you can all come and enjoy all of the wonderful 52 minutes of more developer conversations that we have in store for you in today's video. And in the background, you might notice a lot of buildings and stuff being featured. Those are all the creations of the current friends and family alpha testers. If you want to know who has made what, I definitely recommend going to the official Discord and checking it out. I'm sure they'll all be posting pictures of their creations as well, but I figured since it is Community Week, what better way to feature the community than to show all of the creations that they've done in the Friends and Family Alpha so far, and then also ask all of the questions that you all, the community, have posted for us to ask the developers. So with all of that being said, if you like this type of content, please do leave a like. It helps our channel out a lot. Subscribe so that you can get notified whenever we come out with new Pax Day related content, and share this video with any of your friends who might be interested in Pax Day. All right, let's go ahead and get back to this interview. I hope you all enjoy, and until next time, I'm Eltarii, the professional gamer. Hello and welcome back. We're back again. It's been like a month since the last time we spoke. A lot of stuff has changed since the last build that we were looking at as well. And thank you all for taking the time to not only answer all of the questions that we had previously, but for answering all of the community's questions that we have now. So really quickly, for any new viewers who are just catching up, can you just give us a quick little introduction of who you are, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Hey, I am Peter, design director on Pax Dei.
Hey, I'm Solka. I'm the chief product officer, so basically working with the dev teams on what we're building.
Awesome. Cool. And for today, there are a couple of topics that we are going to cover. The last 4 weeks, we've covered combat, PvP, crafting, and also PvE and exploration. So let's go ahead and start with just playing the game. And specifically, can you talk a little bit more about the player's impact on the world, and in what way players will be able to make a meaningful impact on the lore, either now or as we go into the future as well?
Yep.
So I guess I guess the obvious part of this is the players will be the ones to build all the villages and like define where the population of the world is, and we're really hoping to like do trade and like really figure out like how where everything is in the world, where we've obviously distributed some of the PvE content in places like across the world, and it's actually up to the players to discover where some of that is located. And that's going to shape the overall experience of somebody playing in the game, because each one of the worlds really is going to have a different vibe based on what people have been doing in that very specific world. And we're, as developers, like, as you know, like we're like putting a lot of effort into actually looking at what people are doing, and we're like through like now in the alpha, and like in the future we're going to continue to basically make these observations. And I'm sure we'll be basically writing some of the things that you're actually doing as players into the game as time passes, because we're really like internally saying that like this is like, for actually literally multiple people in the team have been saying that this is the last game they want to work on, because like we're committed to doing this for like the next 20 years. And like there's a lot of ideas how we can develop this further, but it all hinges on like what the players are doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of going into that a little bit, you mentioned the PvE content and how it's being distributed across the world. And one of the questions that some players were asking were, how do you see PvE content being distributed in the PvP zone, Lioness, and similar zones like that in the future?
The Lioness province, the PvP, so where players can go and combat in PvP, is kind of our testing ground. Like we have a lot of kind of future plans for how for PvP, but now we just wanted to have like a very strong like a strong test of like how it actually plays out and kind of see what drives players to PvP, how they view it, how we can iterate on the mechanics themselves. The zone, the Lioness zone has some like rare resources that are in more abundance than elsewhere that kind of tease players and like try to get them there, but we don't want to lock like high level PvE content behind PvP for the players who don't want to take part in it themselves. So while we will expand the PvE content there and in zones where players can be subject to PvP, we still want to have kind of the vast majority of like the most interesting and like rare drops or PvE drops and like in areas where players are not forced into PvP.
Would you say almost that, like, for example, relics might be more abundant in a PvP zone, but you could easily get them elsewhere? It's just more of that risk-reward dynamic? Or is that something the team's considering?
Right. Not the relics specifically, because they are more... those are more like kind of the rare, unique drops, but rather, like right now, we have some materials that you need in bulk that you can harvest elsewhere. It's just time consuming, but there is some more abundance of them present in the PvP zone. So if you want to be more efficient, you can risk going to PvP to try and harvest them from there.
Awesome.
And actually the other dynamic that we've I think talked about previously as well is even if you're a hardcore PvPer and like really just want to focus on PvP, there's going to be plenty of gear that you will want to use that actually like results from drops on PvE. So the ideal mix for a clan that we think is actually going to comprise of people who like PvP, like PvE, like the gathering, like the crafting, like the building. So you actually want to get this like diverse group of people together who like different aspects of the game and then work together to enable all of them to play on the parts that they really enjoy. Because the PvPers can bring the stuff back in for the crafters, but they also will want to get stuff from the PvEers. So everybody is going to be in a happy family and be able to play together and like do a lot of fun.
Yeah, or at least if your clan does not comprise of people who like span all of these different areas in the game, they at least have like reliance on people outside the clan that do that, so they can trade and stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool. And then, kind of, since we shifted into the PvP topic, we're just going straight into the fun things right now. For PvP, I had a couple of questions for you all. One of the things that a lot of people noticed in the previous videos that featured PvP, one of the big things was how long Shield Bash lasts for, and those hard CCs and crowd control. Can we expect some kind of active mechanic to break out of things like hard CC, possibly like a skill or an ability or type of magic or something like that?
So yeah, like a two-part answer there. Like we've still not implemented kind of resistances to status effects. We fully intend to do that and are working on it. Can't say exactly when we'll be done with that. But right now, all of the resistances that you can kind of equip and progress on, they are only used to mitigate damage, but they're not used to mitigate or either to negate status effects or reduce the duration of them. They don't do any of that yet. So when you apply status effects right now, they just get applied. And so any kind of hard CC like Shield Bash you mentioned right now is extremely overpowered, and we're trying to combat that a little bit. So that's one part. Like just hard CC is just too strong, and I think that's the one you mentioned is actually the strongest kind of hard CC you can use in PvP right now. Second part of the answer is like when, like, in addition to the Actually, third part answer. Yeah, in addition to the resist to status effects, I also want to like build into that some kind of diminishing return. So when when a certain type of status effect's been applied to you, you are less subject to that, or like what do you say? Yeah, you
Like you have a cooldown period.
exactly almost like a cooldown period, or like a resist buff to that type of effect for like a short duration. So you can't. Yeah, so it's harder to be kind of get stun locked, for instance. But to the main question, though, yes, we also plan to have, and we are set up to have abilities that break you out of cooldowns or remove damage over time effects like cleanses and things like that. We don't have them in the game right now, but that is totally the plan.
Okay, cool. And I heard you mention stances in there as well, which is great because we have another question that I wanted to ask with specifics in regards to where do you see the balance between like an individual's skill or the preparation of gear and consumables. So like in the future, will we be able to have elements like timed effects such as parrying, or I think we mentioned
Right.
previously in our first interview the dodge roll mechanic and
Yep.
or being able to use a skill to dodge.
Right.
Are there going to be these more timed effects that maybe they're not required for combat, but they're things that can give players maybe a higher skill ceiling type of
Yes,
scenario?
that is the plan. The spells and special abilities that are in the game right now are do not have a very high skill ceiling. I mean, there are some like stun and whatnot, and in PvE there are like mesmerize and stuff like that. But they are, we'll have basically, we're designing more spells and abilities that allow players to kind of explore the skill ceiling a bit more for like more return of investment. For instance, like the bow mechanic, shooting arrows is a very high skill ceiling, and we'll definitely look into more spells that kind of behave that way. For instance, right now I think all of the damaging spells and status effect spells are targeted. We have like one ground targeting spell, but that's like a very large kind of support spell. So yes, you will see more of that going forward.
Okay.
And some of the internal discussion regarding that has been we'll probably tie at least some of these new features into like again gear, so you'll basically progress to get unlocking that feature for you, and like having access to some of them might be mutually exclusive, so you're not going to be able to like perform some of the actions like if you're wearing heavy plate that is basically like encumbers you, but like that might give you some other like skill based ability that you can do. So so skill ceiling things, yes, happening, but in a manner that still like you need to make tactical choices on which one of them you'll be using.
And that's also in the player's wheelhouse to like choose how much like skill requirement they're comfortable with and like playing their own playstyle. If they want to go with some more guaranteed effects, they can like more akin to the kind of the spells that are in the game right now. But if they're very confident and want more basically spells and abilities that have like a higher potential effect, the trade-off there is very often going to be that it's harder to aim or time or stuff like that. So you can kind of choose your own path. That's the goal.
Got it. So in terms of combat, you would say, it's kind of challenged by choice in a way of if you want a potentially higher damaging spell or something like that, you're going to probably have to aim it or time it right in some way, shape, or form in order to land it and do that extra damage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that I guess actually answered your original question. So yes, so preparation in terms of what gear you have, like what the consumables are, we absolutely want that to be significant. So a player, obviously, like ideally, you're going to be both skilled and prepared, and like somebody who actually like is both is going to be much better off than somebody who like only relies on the gear or like only relies on skill. So you will absolutely want to be like prepared in all respects.
Cool. And then, so with regards to combat as well, in terms of like target locking on in melee combat and all of that, is that a feature that's supposed to be a big component of how you see everyone engaging in fights, like in PvP or PvE, or is that more of just a quality of life aspect for certain aspects of the game?
So far, it seemed like just kind of pretty much like a 50-50 kind of player choice and preference, which they want to use. When you mentioned target locking, like for those who have played the game already, like there's a lot of opportunity for us to make, for instance, like just like spell targeting better, especially for support players, for healing and stuff like that. So we are looking at ideas and solutions to make that more kind of affordable and easier. But target locking specifically, it's a feature we wanna keep and make better. But I think ultimately it's always gonna be, very much kind of a player preference. Even just looking at other games that have that feature, like most players use it or like sometimes use it. They don't always use it.
Got it. And then, kind of in the same vein of combat, is a really big comment that I've noticed in my comment section for all of the videos so far is combat animation and impact on the players, and more so the feedback that players are getting for when they're getting hit or where they're getting hit from. Yep. So do you plan to add some kind of collisions in combat or more impact to those animations so that players can get tactical information or tactical awareness from where they're getting hit from?
Yes. Yes to all of the above. So we have been working, we have had like a couple of teams working really hard on just like combat and game feel and animation and VFX and sound effects, just to like give it more impact and feel more visceral and actually informative about what's going on. I think we made like a lot of progress on it. We're not quite there yet. It's basically meaning we're going to continue working on it really hard until we feel like it's like amazing. But that's specifically like knowing where damage is coming from, if you're being hit, like by what type of enemy, if you're and just as importantly, like if somebody else is getting hit, like if your friend is standing right next to you and they're starting taking heavy damage, or like they've entered some kind of area of effect or whatever, we just want to make sure that all of that stuff is getting communicated to you in a way that you understand what's going on and you can actually plan to react. But also just so to feel like it's for it to actually give you like a really good game feel and you understand like that you kind of visually understand what's going on, and like especially if there's like immediate danger. We're working on all of that stuff.
Feel it.
Yeah,
and you mentioned it's a month since the last video that we made, and actually I'm hoping that you're going to be very positively surprised by the game, like the combat changes in the patch that's going live very soon, because it's actually the overall feel and responsiveness has made like huge improvements over the past couple of weeks even. And like we've been adding more information and feedback. So for example, like there's like small things like the shield bash didn't have any VFX to it earlier, which made it like just the overall readability and the feel wasn't like super good, and that's coming online now. So actually like and just it just feels better with the small like additional feedback on the move. So
and also
we're totally
just all of the
continue to improve on this.
And all of the different kind of weapon types or weapon categories have been getting their first kind of full treatment, like so every weapon actually feels different and has different pacing, has different special attacks. We're basically just continuing iterating on that and making it as good as possible. So but like Sulka said, there's been like a lot of improvements in the last month.
Cool. And with some of those improvements coming in, I know some people have asked as well, is the idea for players to be more like locked physically, like in place when they're doing attack animations and stuff like that, or is there a plan to kind of move more into allowing player mobility while doing some of these attacks or all of these attacks in the future?
It's a good question. So the one big part of like the stuff that we've been working on the last 6 or so weeks is like, in addition to like new animations and new VFX and etc., is the fluidity between the different actions, fluidity from like, you know, finishing attack and while waiting to see if you're going to go to the next attack to allow you to actually start moving earlier. And as recently as like just this week, we started working more on like, you know, carrying some of the momentum when you're running and when you're going from like a full speed run to an attack, to actually carry that some momentum into the character. Used to always come to like a complete full stop. So just like we're trying to make all of that kind of very fluid in between the different actions, casting spells and attacks and moving, while still having some like there's some commitment to actually performing most of the attacks and most of the spells, in terms of like if you start an attack, you can't cancel out of it immediately if you're like right in the middle of the swing or right at impact. And that, I mean, that's kind of part of the kind of core player skill that's required to like know when, to actually commit to something and having to at least finish it to some degree before you can like change your mind and do something else. But we're trying to reach that without, you know, combat and the kind of action-based gameplay to feel like sluggish or prohibitive or. And I think we've come a long way in that already, but we still got more ideas and things we're working on to improve it.
Cool. So you'd say that in the future, players can expect to be able to potentially be able to like attack cancel part of an animation or something like that, or is it more committal? Like once you do that click, you're finishing at least that one attack.
At least part of it. You can already, in the build that we have right now, you can already kind of exit the attack earlier than if you did nothing and just watch it play all the way through. So the attacks have like a long kind of follow through kind of tail, but you can like once you made impact, you can like start the next action or start moving sooner than before.
Got it. Cool. Thank you for answering that. And then in terms of combat gear, I know another question that I saw a lot of is everyone's in plate armor. What's going to happen there? So is combat... I know we kind of touched on it the last interview we did with gear, but do you have any kind of feedback and more to answer on that subject of, is like a person who's in full plate armor, is there going to be a very large difference between someone who's in plate versus someone who's in cloth armor? And what are some of those differences that you plan to see?
Yeah, we totally have a plan to make that like as part of the kit when you put it together. Right now, as you said, if you ignore all of the equipment that grants you spells, plate is just objectively, it's just better. So like everyone will just like want to work their way up to like wearing like full plate. And that's going to be the case for at least the next, I don't want to say exactly long like couple of months or so. As soon as we can get to it, we're implementing like sort of like an encumbrance kind of stage encumbrance system, not super granular, but like enough for you to like make informed choices about these things, because heavier equipment will have some drawbacks and make some of the locomotion probably more stamina costly, for instance. So that's one part of it. We'll implement encumbrance for wearable gear equipment. And then, of course, the other kind of part of the puzzle is spells. So, like, as our library of spells in the game grows, players who are like even early on in gameplay will find more and more gear that actually has kind of spells enchanted in the gear, and a lot of kind of whole families of spells will only reside on like leather or cloth or chain or plate. So if you want to like if you want a certain combination of spells to be available to you to kind of fit certain kind of role in combat, those spells, only reside on gear of like a certain kind of a certain category or type, and some of them might not even be able to cast them if you've crossed if you're in kind of the plate encumbrance class. So you might have access to like a firebolt or some kind of area effect, mesmerize or whatever, and you wouldn't be able to even cast a spell if you're wearing like chain or plate.
Got it. Is there any plans for like if I wanted to shoot electricity out of my hands, I can't wear metal on my body because I will just jolt myself to death?
That fits exactly into
Okay.
what I was saying. So yes.
Cool. Awesome. And then kind of in that path of hitting yourself out and all of that, I know a lot of people are very passionate about enjoying the game as more of a solo player experience in a world of a lot of players.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was, what kind of gap do you see between like a fully kitted character with all of the consumables that they need and a basically geared character with just, run-of-the-mill gear and consumable? Is there going to be a really large gap between those two players?
Maybe before I get to that, just to talk about a little bit about solo versus like group players.
Yeah.
We are right now, and we're gonna continue kind of like trying to take really good care of the kind of progression in the game for the solo player. We're less we know that when people start working together, they will solve things like very much more easily. But we want to take good care of kind of making sure that people who are playing solo and they want to get into tailoring or leatherworking or blacksmithing or whatever, that the progression for them to like discover new materials and recipes and so forth is very kind of enjoyable, and that they can easily kind of mark that they're actually progressing and they're actually getting better gear. When it comes to the spells and kind of the kind of high tier armor and weapons, most of those or all of those things require require bulk material that anyone can gather, whether it be like some kind of alloy or pure iron or like high tier like cloth or leather or so forth. So they ought to be able to gather all of those things. But then there's also some items where you need like high-end like PvE drops that are designed to be very difficult to get for a single person, like that you typically would need like a group to actually take down. So if a solo player who does not want to work with other people to go into dungeons, for instance, they will have a hard time getting it themselves, except by like trading with other people. And maybe to tack onto that answer as well, the spells that we have in the game right now, as you've seen playing it, they like all of the ones that we have right now come from like rare kind of PvE spawns. Some of the lower level ones could be soloed by a player who's like really well geared. But we're also gonna, as we're expanding kind of the library of spells in the game, we're gonna have more and more spells that you can encounter much sooner. Kind of in the wild as you're exploring the forests and the mountaintops and so forth. You'll be able to tease some knowledge about like ancient or otherworldly things that can give you access to new gear.
And to tack on to the trading part, actually the build as it stands now, we're not doing very much to facilitate trading between the players other than having crafted the economy in a way where we're very strongly incentivizing people to do that. But we're absolutely committed to actually adding features in the future that will make it a lot easier for the players to play together economically and like trade for real. And
Cool.
Obviously that's going to be huge for the solo players because they can actually supply other people with goods or be able to buy things from others.
So then would you say that the gap between a fully kitted character with full consumables and a basic character, that gap would be a sizably, a large one, or is it something? I think this is kind of more of a question on how big of a factor is a player's skill going to go into their ability to actually conquer some of these, PvE threats or PvP threats as a solo player, as opposed to being able to conquer that in a group or something like that.
The difficulty of the PvE threats it depends a lot on where it's situated and also just how that enemy actually behaves. I'm sure we'll have some PvE threats that players can kind of exploit a bit by just being very skillful, but some that are just like really hard kind of stat checks against that just require a lot of just like raw power. But the skill the kind of the power gap basically between somebody wearing kind of the highest thing that they can make by themselves versus like somebody who is in a big clan, it's sizable, but it's not exponential. Like as you've probably seen in Pax Dei, like we keep kind of the progression curve like fairly flat. It's measurable and meaningful, so you feel like you're progressing, but it's not exponential. So somebody with the best gear in the game, he's not even 10 times stronger than somebody who is not. He's maybe roughly like I don't want to say exactly how much, but it's not it's far from exponential.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually the other thing that came to mind is we've very intentionally like made the game so that for example in PV sites, if a group enters a dungeon, we're not creating a private instance to the group, or like with the PV sites like as well. So you can like as a solo player, you can actually explore the world and use that feature to your advantage, because you might actually be able to go to a like fairly difficult PV site that another group is cleaning at the moment, and have a lot of opportunities to actually like basically solo engage enemies in that location, because we like really wanted to create this environment where like you can play together or like experience these places together and like actually use that to advantage also tactically, which is very different from like the games that actually like explicitly prevent people from playing together or like going to same locations together.
So you can kind of trail end a party that's going through a difficult dungeon to get to a location further in that maybe you can handle a little bit better.
Yeah. And like the bigger dungeons, we're actually like fully expecting that they're big enough to actually like fit multiple groups at the same time. So I'm going to be a very happy player when I can go in and actually like find like 5 groups in one of the biggest dungeons at the same time.
Yeah, cool. And then, so I guess this kind of leads to another question of, with the sandbox nature of Pax Dei, how much of the focus is going to be on that difficult PvE like group content, and where does that play, or where I don't think we're anywhere close to end game yet for Pax Dei, but where do you see end game going for players? Because with sandbox games, it's hard to keep players engaged over long periods of time, and that's I feel like why a lot of survival games have like wipe cycles and stuff like that. But Pax Dei isn't planning on having that on full release. So where do you see endgame kind of going, and to keep players engaged? Loaded question.
Yeah. well, first off, we're planning to have what we call kind of the difficulty mountains, like or the depth of difficulty like very high, and we're not doing like private loot for players, for instance. So if you go into a dungeon with 10 people, like everyone in your group is not going to be getting loot from every mob. They just drop a certain amount of loot, and it's up to you how to distribute it. And I don't know. I mean, I think it goes so long to answer the question. It's not the whole answer, obviously. But we're basically making PV like very deep, very difficult, and we're also not actually. We mean for it to actually be more difficult and deep than we tell you about. So we're actually, when we release new content, we'll hint at what it is, but we're not giving anyone like any of the players kind of the full picture of what it is. So there's actually a lot of difficult content in the game already that players haven't encountered, and we're going to have more and more of that. So it will take a long time for the community to, hopefully, it will take a long time for the community to actually feel like they have a full grasp of all of the content that's in the game, and will continually be kind of deepening that and changing it and giving players kind of opportunities and reasons to actually kind of come back to some locations and look inward to like see what's changed when when we do update the game.
Yeah, but the other part of this is as I hinted with the facilitating trading between the players, is we're now kind of entering the phase of developing Pax Dei where we're starting to seriously look into deeper social mechanics. And what we're very light in at this point is the group to group dynamics. And there's going to be a lot of features going forward that actually incentivizes people to like start building society level things. And we're like, I suspect that we'll be talking about that soon in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe not right now. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, that is of course kind of the true end game, is kind of the high level kind of social gameplay.
Yeah, because and because like if you compare us to like a standard survival game, obviously the fact that we are an MMO and we have thousands of people in the same world, that's the big crucial differentiator, and like we aim to play like on that a lot in the future.
Yes.
So just because you teased it, I feel like a good follow-up question. Would you say a lot of the times when we talk about societal mechanics, especially in survival games, that's almost exclusively tied into PvP specific things where there's a competitive nature, but that's explicitly just, I don't like that person, I'm going to go, kill them and raid their castle or something like that. And I feel like this is a pretty good tie-in to another question that I have right after this. But are there going to be societal structures that exist in game that are more PvE focused and something where you don't have to go and maybe murder a bunch of people, but can just participate in this other type of social structure?
While of course there's going to be a lot of murdering, that is not that is just a means to some ends, not all of them. And yes, so players who want to be like either going to contribute or either want to contribute or be big players in the social structure of their world, are going to be competing for or supporting their friends or other people to like positions of power. And that is not just a position of power to go to PvP, even though that's a big part of it. It's also a position of power and for other kind of societal kind of benefits and objectives. And like professions, like all kinds of like crafting and gathering professions, are also not excluded from this. So another kind of big arcing thing that I don't want to promise when, but it's still big. It's a big part of the kind of the social kind of design philosophy and direction we're going, are guilds, like guilds of like blacksmiths and bakers and stuff like that. I want to go into too much detail about those ideas right now, but that's kind of in the area of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's super difficult to talk about this like without going into detail. But like the other like thing that I thought I'd love to mention is the like on the philosophy level, as Peter hinted at, is the like we really want to create all of these features in a manner that are extremely player driven. So rather than us creating rigid structures that you would play as a mechanic in a game where there's a like predefined progression loop by the developers, it's going to be like we're going to be making this in a manner where it's going to be the players in control of like how the society actually like ends up evolving and what happens in the game. So hopefully a bit different from other games have done this.
Yeah. So like almost as though players are actively building out these social systems in a way and kind of determining what advancement in that kind of looks like, so to speak.
I guess we'll share more
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And then that kind of ties into the like wars and sieges and how that kind of is going to develop in the future. Because as the society is building out, right? What does the future of Pax Dei's PvP look? Because right now we just have Lioness, it's full loot, and you go in there, and once you pass the barrier, it's just kill or be killed. And people are really wondering what is PvP going to develop into in the future?
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, the PvP we have right now in the game are basically heretics fighting chaotically at the kind of the edge of the the edge of the map.
We
But
just have a murder basically at the moment.
yeah, the trying to find an answer without going into any kind of detail that I need to walk back. We have talked about it extensively, and we have a good plan. There's basically we want to both fulfill the appetite for players who intermittently want to do some PvP, but don't want to be subject to PvP all the time, and are maybe more focused on doing PvE or like building their village, but are interested in like either doing PvP for PvP itself, or like to fight with a cause, or like to support their clan. But we also want to make sure, like as part of the social structure we talked about before, we want to have like allow players to like claim a cause that they actually want to fight for. And now we're talking about like knights and their soldiers, and like barons and like knights coming together to form baronies and kingdoms. So like a feudal PvP that's like sanctioned under the eye of the divine. And yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
so there's
Cool.
going to be PvP outside of Lioness eventually. That is a given.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as Peter said, like we probably don't want to go to details right now because we don't know exactly when that's going to land, and we definitely need the feedback from the players, like what the current experience is, and probably iterate on the PvP, like the core PvP combat system to make it better. Before we should be adding like deeper mechanics that build on top of the baseline of the PvP to feel really good.
And that's
Got it.
and that's also kind of the big part of why we have Lioness and the PvP they have in there right now, because we're working really hard on making combat game feel good and like be actually telegraph what's going on. And we don't want to do that in the absence of having PvP in the game. We want the PvE and PvP combat systems to be like super compatible and as close to one another as possible. We don't want to have like all kinds of exceptions in PvP, for instance. And so we're kind of working on and building on that, and going to be gathering feedback from the players on that as we are kind of building all of these kind of features and systems that allow amazing kind of social structures to actually be formed by the players. And as Sulka alluded to earlier, those are like allowing players to like build markets and like claim positions of power and fight over them or argue over them, and to resolve some of those conflicts through PvP. Those are the biggest and most urgent things that we want to get to now that we have a game that is actually this kind of coherent and works, and it's actually like it's very fun to play. This is kind of what it's all building up towards, is to get to that point.
And the key challenge that we're like, I think we did talk about the last time, is because we really want the game to be very enjoyable by the PvEers who don't want to do PvP, and we want the PvPers who love PvP also love the PvP parts, and enable these two player types to mix in a manner that ideally both find very fruitful. And it's a really hard, tough nut, and like we're gonna be totally talking to the player base about like our ideas when we're ready to preview a bit more.
Yep.
It sounds like the general kind of important thread for players to hear as well is that while PvP might expand outside of zones like Lioness in the future, it's going to be in a way where it's still opt-in players who want to engage in that kind of thing, and there will be incentives for them to engage in that kind of thing. It's not something that players have to engage in or don't get a choice when engaging.
Exactly.
Correct.
In certain
Exactly.
ways.
Yes.
But simultaneously, there's probably going to be a we're going to be playing on the risk reward as with Lioness
Right.
on participating in PvP.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that I think that clears it up for a lot of players in that way. Since we're still talking about PvP, I feel like we've come full circle here. Full loot. A lot of people saw that full loot icon and they said, "What the heck?" Full loot will really screw with how they want to play the game. What is the ideas on full loot? Are there going to be any exceptions for specific items? Is this an important concept for the team? And is that something that you see continuing throughout PvP and how it's planned to develop in the future? For
Lioness, we went as hardcore as we could. It takes a while to actually get there. There's full loot. It's too early to give detail about all other variants of PvP when it starts happening outside of Lioness. But we'll still probably err on the side of full loot or something close to it, because all the gear and weapons is part of the economy. It's not really part of it's not part of your character, because you can basically switch out to different gear. So of course it means that if you have a very limited amount of the best gear, the best gear that you have, or limited amount of gear that allows you to kind of fit into the role that you want to play in combat, it's going to be very costly for you, of course, right now to go into Lioness and lose those items. But items exit the economy all the time through durability. But yeah, well, it's more to share about that later when we start talking about more PvP.
But basically, the going very hardcore on Lioness was part of the plan of actually let's make the hardcore PvP experience, get the feedback from players, and it's been kind of interesting to hearing a lot of the very hardcore PvPers saying that this is maybe a bit too hardcore. So so it's actually really great feedback, and that's why the PvP is there. So
yeah, and I feel like it's also just from a design perspective too, it's easier to go the extreme and then pull back in some areas as opposed to not going extreme and then suddenly shocking everyone with here's full loot. So I think I think that kind of clears it up for some people.
That's also part of it.
Yeah. So then you're out in a PvP zone, you're possibly brutally murdered, you're dead. What are the respawn mechanics for players in PvP zones? Is there going to be a resurrection mechanic, some kind of spawn kill protection, or a clock where players who are entering and exiting? Now, I feel like some of this we already have with the barrier when you enter into the PvP zone. But I guess this also might be in the same vein as, okay, so I've traveled 15, 20, 30 minutes to get into a PvP zone. I get into the PvP zone and I'm just really unlucky and I get killed in the first 5 minutes of walking out into the area. That's all my gear just instantly gone. Is there going to be any ways for us to have kind of more dynamic, not dynamic, but the ability to get kits or something like that and store them so that we can go back into PvP without having to respawn and make a 20-minute journey back home and a 20-minute journey back the PvP zone to just get back into the fight kind of thing? Is there any plans for that right now, or I don't know how much you can share on that.
Yeah, I understand. No, I totally understand. There is, when you die, you respawn you respawn basically under the protection of Pax Dei, outside of the PvP. So you you're not going to be like insta killed immediately when you spawn. You have to actually go back into Lioness. But yes, the example you gave would be a very painful one. You make a 20-minute travel with your gear, you enter Lioness, and you are ambushed immediately and killed. And that's kind of the hardcore experience that we have right now. We're not immediately like making we're not immediately implementing anything to make that less painful. But yeah,
Pain's good though, right?
we are looking at it. The pain is good. I don't know. I'm sure some players are going to disagree with me on that. So I won't say that. But it's part of the risk. It is a big risk. So it is right now. It like if you're going to go into PvP, it's a bit of a journey. Like you're investing. Like okay, tonight I'm gonna go to Lioness and I'm gonna find a couple of friends, and we, if it's our first time, maybe we don't fully appreciate how much risk it is. But if we heard the stories or we've been there before, we know what we're getting ourselves into. So it makes it just that more stressful, I think. Like when you actually enter the PvP area in Lioness, because you know what's at risk.
Yeah.
And you know what effort you went through to actually get there.
Yeah, and the thing to understand, the Lioness, it's actually like it's not huge, but it's still pretty big. And depending on like when you enter, you might actually be able to venture quite a while there before you beat the first person. So so it actually at least the way we've been playing it, it's very unpredictable what happens there. So if you're lucky, you can just go in and get a nice bunch of resources and escape and not actually meet anybody. Or like if you're really into fighting, then you might actually be able to find 100 people there.
Yeah,
and that's gonna be hard too.
And I guess it's important to also note that like the benefits of resources like pure iron, for example, are tremendous. Being able to go into that zone and actually gather them and just go back and go straight into making steel ingots as opposed to having to refine it up and stuff like that. So there are true real benefits to actually risking it all, so to speak, in order to go into those zones. So
you can also
it's good that there is some risk.
You can also just go there as a hobo, just wearing your slacks and iron pickaxe and or steel pickaxe.
And hope for the best.
Put less on the line, but
by the way, pure iron, like it is available outside the Lioness. It's just very rare. So
okay,
I suggest
to know.
Yeah, go try to find it.
Taking a look. Interesting. Is that potentially one of those hints that we're getting right now for things to go look at?
It's also pretty recent. It's also pretty recent change, right?
It's very recent.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, I will try to not take advantage of that in the short period of time that we have between now and the launch of the alpha. Okay, I think I'm looking here, and I think we've asked pretty much all of the questions that we had selected from the community. So, it's been a real pleasure to be able to interview all of you. I think now we've spoken for over 3 hours combined with our cumulative interviews here, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how players engage with this amazing game that you're actively making right now. So thanks for everything that you do. I'm sure the community truly does appreciate it, and I know I do. And thanks for having this follow-up interview with me.
Thank you
very much. Likewise, anytime. Happy to do this later.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks guys.